Jerry Reed and Burt Reynolds were giants of their time. One changing Hollywood effortlessly charismatic, the other instinctively reinventing American music and grit. Their on-screen friendship seemed simple, even delightful, constructed on common origins, laughing. But away from spotlight, their relationship followed much more difficult path. And before finally, Burt Reynolds died, said what he hid for years about Jerry Reed. And nobody was prepared. Everyone's favorite pair. Audiences believed for years understood Burt's relationship Jerry Reed, Reynolds. On screen, they appeared inseparable. Two men fit wonderfully sync, swapping humor and loyalty as if that was natural. Chemistry felt authentic because it. But behind the laughs and box office success, Reynolds observed Reed that were never released. Something that wasn't carefree. Finally, decades later, Reynolds spoken about it. His words resonated amazing collaboration in distinct light. But long before public embraced them as sunbreakable pair, their relationship began quietly, almost accidentally. Reed first met Reynolds midway 1970s in WW with him Dixie Dance Kings and Gator. Cultural events weren't on the level of what would follow, but they helped Reynolds see what others hadn't noticed. Reed was untrained like a traditional actor. He didn't perform Polish. He had instead timing, instinct, and ease that cameras rarely forgive. Newcomers. Reynolds noticed. By that, Reynolds was already running from Hollywood power that he changed after Deliverance, a box office powerhouse practically overnight. He was tough and humor made him wealthy, and films like The Longest Yard secured his popularity by the mid-1970s. He wasn't just he shaped movies while starring. That effect was critical during Smokey and the Bandit development. Reynolds wasn't only the star. Project, he directed it. And when casting the role of Cletus, Snowman, Snow, truck driver counterpart designed to balance Bandit's swag. Studio had others' names in mind. Jerry Reed not their top on their list. From there he started as a musician, innovative casting with limited film experience. However, Reynolds disagreed. Reed was his choice because he already knew Reed's cargo. Reed was South. He got the beat, comedy, pauses, and culture which the film needed. Reynolds knew that genuineness wasn't possible. Manufactured. And because of the earlier collaboration, he trusted Reed's instincts entirely. Back then, Reed didn't require Hollywood approval. A Grammy-winning country artist, musician revered for both writing and playing guitar. Songs Guitar Man and Amos Moses made him a familiar American voice. His music before fans saw him cowboy hat on screen. That hadn't have yet defined film role. Smokey and the Bandit altered that. Reed played Snowman and helped shape the film's sound that he composed and performed. Eastbound Down didn't just accompany the film, became inseparable from it. Song nailed speed, comedy, and rebellious story tone. It became the film's unofficial raconteur. For many viewers, just the initial notes trigger truck stop, CB radio memories roads open. On screen, chemistry between men was perfect. Reynolds played smooth outlaw with movie star disputed his confidence, grounded humor, simple discourse comic timing perfection. Their reunion Reed fitted Hooper again, that natural Reynolds world without upsetting it. But there was more, returning for Smokey and the Bandit 2 and later appears in collective pandemonium of Cannonball Run. Reynolds declined participation part 3 of Smokey and the Bandit. Reed took over as leader, an inconceivable act a few years ago. That alone spoke eloquently about Reed's progress and how closely his screen identity was linked to the franchise Reynolds built. Off-screen, the relationship was as real as audiences suspected. They were similar backgrounds, similarities in humor, and comprehending Southern identity that not excessive or theatrical. Reynolds frequently spoke with admiration for Reed's talent, especially his mobility music and movies without losing any space's trustworthiness. Yet, even at their best years, Reynolds observed things silently. Not many did. At the back behind the easygoing air, jokes they showed challenges that never ended that appeared in press tours or interviews. Reynolds later admitted that saw off-camera stayed with him some troubled him more than he let on then. Because while the audience witnessed a flawless pairing, men behind it carried much more greater than popular perception. What Burt Reynolds concealed himself. For most his career, Burt Reynolds predicted an image of control and ease. A man who he appeared confident and moved around Hollywood without visible strain. Yet behind that public confidence was internally molded physical pain, emotional isolation, a chain of events that gradually built before public view realized something was wrong. Reynolds had built his reputation on toughness and trust, in part off from his refusal to trust relying on stunt doubles that garnered him set esteem but left and healed damage. Early in his career, Reynolds forced his body beyond what most prominent actors tolerated, insisted on falling himself, fights and high-risk acts whenever possible. And while that pledge made his performances more realistic, caused subsequent injuries him for decades. The harm wasn't confined to one event or job. Knee problems aggravated, backache, and physical discomfort limits become his daily norm even as his screen persona kept suggesting strength invincibility. A major concern setbacks occurred during city filming. An accident left Reynolds with heat, a severe jaw damage that required surgery, lengthy medical therapy, difficult recovery, introduced him to prescription medicines that stay in his life longer than intended. Not seen by the public was how that injury altered his relationship with control and agony. Still going on, constant bodily discomfort presence, medicine dependence blurred therapy and addiction, complicating his health when his career was also shifting away from his former domination. As roles less frequent and box office motion slowed, physical constraints he always ignored became inescapable. He was left with limited movement, and chronic pain shaped his latter life more than fans ever realized. Alongside the physical deterioration was emotional difficulty Reynolds hardly addressed boldly at his best. It was because his brand needed charisma, comedy, and confidence, not weakness, that he struggled with depression privately, deeper as his injuries became worse reduced options. Later, he admitted feeling lonely during times he was recognizable everywhere he went. He described a sensation of unrelated loneliness, fame, and everything related regret and deterioration steadiness he once took for granted. That his finances were unstable, Reynolds' public image area again concealed a much more complex truth. Despite millionaires during his most prosperous years, spending behaviors, business decisions, and lifestyle life steadily weakened finances. Earnings should be secure provided. Reynolds invested extensively in endeavors without rewards, lifestyle that was lavish, anticipated his income would never drop. Underestimated expense speed could overrun a large fortune. Professional momentum waned. The deteriorated in the early 1990s when debts and legal fees pushed him bankrupt. A major element in financial problems was his marriage to Lonnie Anderson. A passionate relationship, early media coverage, and got more contentious behind closed doors. Their marriage, which started in 1988 and concluded in 1994, nasty, expensive divorce draining his finances with legal fees, settlements. It added emotion, stress, an already difficult period. With his finances deteriorating, Reynolds forced to sell personal property, treasured items related to his work and identity, not as a symbol, but practical need to pay debts had become unmanageable quietly. Reynolds lived romantically, similar intensity pattern after high-profile relationship loss. They rarely ended well and often left lasting emotional harm. Even though he associated with several notable personalities with time, one relationship remained fundamental to his thoughts long after finished. His link with he later described Sally Field Osh's lifelong love. Their friendship that unfolded during height of his fame ended early 1980s. Reynolds later admitted that his breakup haunted him more than allowing everyone to view then, becoming regrettable or occurred as other aspects his life unraveled. By the years moving on, Burt Reynolds' gap repute and his standing in Hollywood expanded. Because after dominating box office throughout 1970s and early 1980s, momentum that sustained his career began to slow in challenging ways reverse. A run of poor results films eroded his credibility, leading dude. Conflict, story set, and studio resistance anticipation accompanied him into rooms where decisions were made. This gradually changed bosses' views him. Industry once built projects surrounding him grew hesitant, then distant, leaving Reynolds. He faced professional deterioration, never anticipated, and did not admit openly. Reynolds worked steadily, but the roles lacked cultural weight. His prior successes and confidence he previously had negotiations stopped turning into leverage. Hollywood moved on, and Reynolds, who excelled in an industry once praised his instincts, navigating one he didn't change their rewards. This explains his boogie appearance. Nearly everyone was startled by nights. Cast a turbulent and demanding director, Reynolds performed. It deprived him of charm, replaced it with anything raw and uncomfortable. The role won him an Oscar nomination and momentarily repositioned him a serious drama actor, opening doors seemingly closed opportunities barely a few years prior. But even as the film renewed critical interest in work, Reynolds later distanced himself, describing the project as overly gloomy and uncomfortable with its tone. This response showed his continuous reconciliation struggle public legacy with challenging role set. Meanwhile, the physical and medical effects from earlier years continuing to shape his life, notably his dependence on prescription drug. This affected his health and weakness that increased visible with age. His state became worse when heart concerns surfaced, approaching quintuple bypass surgery 2010 treatment that emphasized his body had endured long after cameras stopped praising him toughness. Despite these obstacles, Reynolds remained involved, continued taking positions, and appear publicly despite his deterioration in health. Privately, he talked more about loneliness and regret, especially as friendships dissolved and life slowed. He pondered the cost of decades-old decisions earlier, including declining roles later become American landmark cinema. He declined one-flu roles. Terms of Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he admitting weighing endearment, T.O. remind him of chances this may have changed his later career. Reynolds wrote his autobiography that introduced himself modestly once defined his public image, describing a life despite enormous fame and success left him feeling pressured and unfulfilled mistakes he couldn't fix. And as Reynolds struggled entirely hidden, his closest partner amid his greatest success years faced a subtle breakdown as a different path passage, but caused similarly heavy consequences. Sad struggles that followed. Reed, Jerry. Long before audiences know Jerry Reed as clever snowman or man behind few famous countries' 20th century guitar riffs, his life has been shaped by insecurity, poverty, and hardship that never eased grip. Reed came from a poor cotton family, farming family in rural Georgia. Financial uncertainty persisted, that emotional stability never was guaranteed. The early conditions compelled him to mature swiftly in situations that offered little protection or predictability. As Reed was a foster child, after his familial situation changed extremely unsteady, fluctuating sheltering environments rarely permanent. Music became his shelter. He took the played guitar young and showed talent virtually immediately. He picked up rhythm intuitively rather than academically. In his teens, he performed in bars and performing for adults at nightclubs. Reed recorded music in the 1950s, entering an industry with possibility, but little patience artists who didn't fit business expectations. His early label contractors delivered nothing meaningful success, not lack of potential, yet his sound didn't align well with trends. In this time, Reed supported himself with odd chores, keep writing, playing, and recording. Finally, persistence paid off when Presley recorded Reed's tune. Guitar Man changed Reed's life. Industrial status virtually overnight. Elvis's endorsement didn't work, that only confirmed the tune. It confirmed Reed, composer and musician, opening previously closed doors remains closed. From then on, Reed's career grew, resulting in chart success, Grammy and public recognition visibility. But even as professionals, personal behaviors improved, recognition formed earlier in life stayed established, especially his dependence on cigarettes. Reed smoked heavily for majority of his adult life, and while the habit rarely made headlines, quietly affecting his health over contributing to physical limits that grew difficult to overlook. His optimism, charisma, and casual humor made it audiences assumed he was untouched by his precious career. Those closest to him realized his energy was projected, often hid struggles, dependence, and self-control. As the years passed, those effects habits became apparent. Reed got emphysema and other problems, health issues that declined his endurance and lung capacity. His former habit of performing physically demanding, then tiring and growing unmanageable. Reed refused to move away, recording continuously appear on stage if his body allowed. His demise was gradual, it relentless, with shorter appearances, less performing long periods out of the spotlight. Reed concentrated on writing and recording when feasible, committed to stay innovative despite declining strength. His voice, once easy and authoritative, his playing abilities deteriorated. Prolonged, decreased. As Jerry Reed's fame grew, that new musical and film style stress followed. Because while audience hugged him on TV, industry rarely envisioned him outside limited roles. In films like Hooper, Reed, and Smokey become synonymous with the comic Southern sidekick exists on humor, warmth, and instinct over transformation. Despite those performances were popular, progressively set expectations for he was allowed to act. After decades, he resurfaced into the job of Waterboy reinforced that public image. Entertainment while discreetly affirming Hollywood still viewed him as familiar. TYP casting had a subtle effect that persistent Reed career string. Outside of movies, he was a serious musical guitar pioneer. Admired technique, songwriting ability, creative scope. On set, they qualifications rarely translated into challenging opportunities dramatically. While Reed never fought over jobs openly, evident that acting was secondary industry opinion on him. His film career gained attention constant effort, but it never reached his artistic or cultural peak music. He was regarded, recognized, but limited identity. He had little contra-lover shaping. Reed's finance strip matched many musicians who matured before artists generally maintained ownership and control excessive work. Early in his career, fluctuations in income and royalty structures prevented success always become financial security. He had to stay active and flexible even during when his name mattered. The country music sector, particularly developed during the 1970s and 80s, rewarded youth and novelty fiercely. Thus, Reed had to continuously change his sound, partnerships, and public appearances survive in a landscape rarely paused. In the 1990s, that adaptability took shape cooperation when Reed joined Old Mel and Dogs with Juan Jennings, Bobby Bare, Tillis. The group drew shared history and established Reed might use reputations to respect audiences while reconnecting storytelling style musicianship that defined him early years. Not reinvented in modern times, but it was a confirmation that his relevance was substance-based band trend. Despite his health nevertheless, Reed refused retreat wholly from creativity, continued to write, record, contribute wherever his condition allowed. According to those nearest to him, he participated staying in the studio as long as possible, working steadily till his body quit ceases cooperation. Not out duty, but because creation had always his default. The gradual stamina lost limited initial shows, then travel extended sessions. Yet Reed adjusted gently dimming visibility without declaring an end. As of September 1, Reed died in Nashville in 2008 from emphysema complications, concluding an endurance-filled existence than ease. His death was felt immediately throughout both countries' film and music communities. Fewer tributes mention chart positions or box office data, and more his consistency and contribution how his presence shaped projects without dominating. And as Reed's legacy was discussed, surface, one voice conveyed peculiar weight long before public returned their partnership. Burt Reynolds' personal views regarding Jerry Reed that showed more difficult man truth people thought they knew. This confession cast their famous an entirely different friendship light. Burt Reynolds speaks who trade, Jerry. When Burt Reynolds spoke publicly discussing Jerry Reed later, his words weighed differently than light-hearted tales we're used to hearing. By then, there was no project to promote, no picture protect, only reflection molded by loss and distance. Reynolds consistently always returned toward was mentioned. He wasn't talented, single and intentional. Had described Reed as a mover fluidly between music and acting, saying Reed understood timing and teachable, and because his intuition enhanced every scene people shared. Reynolds was particularly clear on Reed's position defining Smokey, and the Bandit observed the film's vitality. Came from more than performances stunts, but its pace and sound. Reed defined both. He frequently noted that Eastbound Down was more than a soundtrack addition, but something that became indivisible from the film. Reynolds praised Reed's authenticity, that acute humorous timing and southern presence with cinematic grounding, saying Reed provided balance for the humor to land without appearing forced exaggerated. Beyond talent, Reynolds made their relationship plain far exceeded professional convenience. He didn't call Reed a co star, but true buddy, someone who shared his humor, tales, and rural culture, someone whose company fit versus strategic. Reynolds highlighted what viewers observed on screen didn't make chemistry, but a genuine friendship that lasted. Off-camera time shapes films constructed and scenes played out. Reynolds claims Reed was present, offered Smokey films looseness and warmth that couldn't copied by someone else. After Reed's 2008 death, Reynolds' tone altered dramatically when speaking about him, and interviews from then period showed his emotions he rarely showed. His loss of Reed affected him deeply, describing their connection went beyond screen share time, and losing Reed meant losing a rare, Hollywood figure trusted fully. Reynolds referred toward as brother, a term he didn't use carelessly, emphasizing its rarity. Industry trust alliances were typically fleeting. Reynolds returned to the famed casting story, remembering Reed first rejected Smokey and the Bandit due to scheduling issues, and his response was immediate. Reynolds echoed his words that enjoyment and conviction, "I'll drive to your house, throw you in car, and transport you to the set." I mentioned that the persistence because he trusted Reed only one could play Cletus. Snowman, Snow properly. When considering Reed's takeover, Bandit and Smokey and the Bandit Part 3, Reynolds approached subject with comedy instead defensiveness, admitting Reed's willingness to intervene when he would not return. Although Reynolds separated himself from the third film, respected Reed's kindness and preparedness to advance the franchise, Reynolds' conclusion is supported achieved frequently later in life, that Jerry Reed wasn't his only success, but one of few who actually told him. Reed himself would mention Reynolds and tell what he kept secretly years. Jerry Reed's admission. Reynolds, when Jerry Reed discussed Burt Reynolds, showed how important Reynolds had traveled in film. Reed framed Reynolds consistently as a faithful friend who opened doors instances when Hollywood wasn't natural inclined, and he never wavered on his screen career modified because Reynolds agreed to advocate for him while others hesitated. Reed admitted his casting in Smokey and the Bandit didn't happen to studio enthusiasm or accident, but because Reynolds demanded. His credit was Reynolds noticing something in he moved beyond novelty or comedy relief. He realized that without such insistence, Cletus' role Snowman Snow could have gone to someone else. Reed frequently interviews grinned recalling that time. Speaking with familiarity implied thanks without hyperbole, respect without performance, making it obvious Reynolds' support was not intimate, but transactional. One of Reed revisited most stories showed that relationship better clearer than any formal tribute could. Reynolds first phoned him in joining Smokey and the Bandit. Reed hesitated, saying he had scheduling conflicts and duties that prompted cinematic commitment difficult. Reynolds' reaction, for Reed, negotiating wasn't traditional persuasion, but insistence. Reed understood then. Reynolds' non-posture moment. He desperately wanted Reed in the film himself remove all obstacles. That determination carried weight. Reed joined the project. What ensued was one of the most popular partnership recognition film of the time. Later, Reed's decision acknowledged altered audience behavior. Studios saw him. Years later, when Reynolds left Smokey, Reed discovered the Bandit Part 3 himself in an unexpected situation, taking on the position that defined Reynolds on screen. Rather than respecting the present, Reed discussed it with the same irreverence that had always his appeal, included capturing both excitement and amazement. His joke publicly discussing the change. "I understand no need to drive to be the Bandit, and oh hauling on the truck." He added another line that audiences remembered clearly. "I'll rob. I get to wear the hat and drive. I adore this." The delivery was humorous, and the remarks reflected Reed's understanding the role, not simply a wardrobe change, but important point in his relationship with Reynolds and their franchise put together. Reed never framed opportunity to replace Reynolds. Butaz entering something his friend made possible initially. Reed never exaggerated Reynolds' life role or parody with him in Hollywood power, instead letting little stories' unpolished remarks show themselves. If you liked the video, remember to click the next video screen, like this video, and join our channel for more updates.